Hi y'all, today I'm going to go through a list of my top 10 favorite films of 2023. There were a bunch of films this year that I really enjoyed, so narrowing them all down to a list of 10 was tricky, and even now I'm questioning my ranking. But nonetheless, let's get into it. At number 10, I have The Killer. This is the latest film from David Fincher, and while I haven't watched all his films, I can't say I've seen one by him that I've disliked. I even found The Game entertaining, albeit not at the same level as Seven or Fight Club. Frequent Fincher collaborators Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross of Nine Inch Nails provide a subtle soundtrack to The Killer that complements the often restrained feel of the film, with moments of explosion dispersed. Fassbender plays a contract assassin who monologues about his unfeeling approach to killing and the emotional distance he keeps, before a mistake makes things very personal for him and his actions through the rest of the film begin to contradict everything he led us to believe. Tilda Swinton also shines as another contract killer who finds herself caught up in the protagonist's revenge crusade. As with many Fincher films, the tension is always simmering, especially during the quieter moments, and the film carries his distinctly green and blue color grading. When there is action, it is quick and brutal, aside from the Florida fight scene, which was gruesomely drawn out and had me at the edge of my seat. While not the best of Fincher, I was unexpectedly impressed by The Killer, a film I knew essentially nothing about before watching it. The queer horror film Attachment takes the 9th spot on this list. Attachment is another film, like The Killer, which took me by surprise. It was a new addition to Shudder that sounded interesting enough, but I was not expecting the excellent subversions provided by this heartfelt horror. Soon after Leia begins a relationship with Maya, she suffers from seizures and is forced to move back in with her mother in London. Maya accompanies her, much to the dismay of Leia's mother Chana. While the premise of an evil mother meddling with the insecurities that come with a new romance seems like a done-to-death narrative in the vein of something like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Attachment breathes new life into the story, with its well-developed and complicated character motivations, as well as the endearing romance which at times reminds me of the Before trilogy. Attachment takes time to invest in its characters before introducing horror elements, making the emotional ending even more impactful for us as an audience. Attachment was a great surprise, and one of my favorite films of 2023. Coming in at number 8, I chose indie horror sensation When Evil Lurks. I watched director Damien Rugna's film Terrified a couple years ago on Shudder, and quite enjoyed it, but I like 2023's When Evil Lurks even more. The film is a bold new chapter for possession horror that throws the viewer into the middle of a world where possessions are so common that the government has specific departments with specialists who can safely exorcise the demons plaguing their country. The film forgoes religion and roots itself in local Argentinian issues, including biting commentary based on the actual government's failure to establish measures to protect farmers from cancerous pesticides. I know that sounds weird, but the possession affliction essentially acts as a metaphor for the lack of care the Argentinian government has shown to its rural residents. In regards to the horror elements, the gore effects are gooey and gruesome, and the film has no qualms about depicting harm to women, children, and animals. The 7 rules develop the demon lore and make the filmic world feel fleshed out beyond its budget. When Evil Lurks expertly balances social commentary with disturbing horror, and I'm excited to see what other films Damien Rugna will concoct. At number 7, I have Leave the World Behind. Not only is the cast stacked with Hollywood heavyweights including Mahershala Ali, Julia Roberts, Ethan Hawke, and Kevin Bacon, but it is also directed by Sam Esmail of Mr. Robot fame. Mr. Robot is one of my top 10 favorite shows of all time, and I loved Esmail's feature film, Comet, with Emmy Rossum and Justin Long, so I was eagerly anticipating Leave the World Behind, and it did not disappoint. This film is visually striking, and oozing with Esmailian elements like framing characters with lots of space over their heads, and media critique, particularly of sitcoms. While the action set pieces are sparse, this decision makes them more impactful when they do occur in some of the most intense sequences I saw in a film this year. Esmail also uses cross-cutting between several different scenes to ramp up the tension. Despite its long runtime, the film never drags. There is always tension between the characters thrown into a mysterious calamity they, and by consequence, the audience, knows nothing about, until revelations late into the film. I also loved that Leave the World Behind pissed off right-wingers, who can't seem to understand that one line from one character in a fictional film isn't an attack on freedom. Overall though, I thoroughly enjoyed Leave the World Behind and its fascinating character studies. In spot number 6, I chose John Wick Chapter 4. I feel that the John Wick films constitute one of the great modern American action series, expertly drawing on the gory brutality and outstanding fight choreography from Asian action films like The Raid or The Night Comes for Us. The 4th entry in this series delivered everything I was hoping for from a John Wick film. There were numerous set pieces of action spectacle that upped the ante from previous entries, including the roundabout fight, the staircase battle, and a sequence that felt straight out of Hotline Miami, excellently fusing video game aesthetics into film action. Even if his survival made little sense, it was great to have Lawrence Fishburne back, alongside series regulars including Ian McShane, Lance Reddick, and of course Keanu Reeves as the titular action hero, who actually feels more like a supernaturally endowed slasher. Donnie Yen, Clancy Brown, and Bill Skarsgård were all great additions to the cast. There's a great deal of emotion weaved throughout the film's narrative as John seeks vengeance against the High Table. It's between 1 and this film for my favorite in the John Wick series, but Chapter 4 earns 6th place on this list. Breaking into the top 5, I have Scream 6. Scream is one of my favorite horror franchises, and perhaps the most consistent, so I had high hopes for Scream 6, and it absolutely delivered. I already did a video kind of breaking down a lot of the things I liked in Scream 6, so I won't say too much about it, but once again, it's directed by Radio Silence, and I enjoyed Scream 6 even more than their franchise debut with Scream 5. Scream 6 takes the key elements of a Scream film and applies creative subversions to the formula, which keeps the sixth entry fresh for franchise fans. Great attention is paid to the Scream lore, and it is clear the film is made by fans for fans. Even though this is the first film without Sydney, the young cast is excellent, so her absence does not hamper Scream 6. The film was everything I was hoping for, earning it 5th place in my top 10. My number 4 spot goes to Saw 10. As with Scream, Saw is one of my favorite horror franchises, and another that has been quite consistent. While 2021's Spiral took the franchise in an entirely new direction, Saw 10 goes back to the series' roots, taking place between Saw and Saw 2. The first 3 films in the franchise are generally regarded by fans to be the best of Saw, so the decision to go back and tell a story from the perspective of fan-favorite characters John and Amanda had many excited even before the film released. However, I wasn't prepared for the maturity that was brought to this film. The first half hour or so of Saw 10 forgoes horror and flashy rapid-cut editing for a restrained character study of John, which felt more like a drama than a horror. While all previous entries have had victims as the protagonists, Saw 10 is the first in the franchise to follow John in the leading role. This allowed for fascinating insights into his character and relationship with his pseudo-daughter, Amanda. Amanda is my favorite character in all of Saw, and Saw 10 further develops her character in interesting ways which make her demise in Saw 3 all the more tragic. Saw 10 is now the highest rated in the franchise amongst critics on Rotten Tomatoes, which is almost unfathomable for a horror series, but it more than earns this incredible feat with its complex character relationships and mature writing that dispels notions that Saw is just mindless torture porn. Surprisingly, my choice for number 3 goes to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. While I thought a Marvel film making my top 10 last year was unexpected, Guardians 3 getting 3rd place this year is even more of a shock to me. I wasn't even planning on watching this movie, as I was not a fan of the first 2. However, James Gunn has been on an animal rights kick lately, from the social critique surrounding the cow in the Peacemaker television series, to Rocket's heart-wrenching origin story in Guardians 3. The tragic beginnings of the lovable raccoon expertly depicted the horrors of animal experimentation in a film that pushed the boundaries of its PG-13 rating with some truly grotesque sequences. Aside from Rocket, the rest of the cast are great, especially Bautista as Drax, Maria Bakalova as the adorable space dog Cosmo, and Will Poulter as the naive villain Adam Warlock. The VFX were great, as is to be expected given the film's budget, but one fight scene in particular near the end of the film provided some truly unique action spectacle in a sequence using the Birdman technique to make it all look like one long take. The film also featured the song Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine, which I thought was awesome. Guardians 3 is an emotional end to the trilogy and my 3rd favorite film of 2023. In at number 2, I have Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan is probably my favorite director, so it's no surprise this film ranks so highly on my list. This 3-hour epic chronicling the creation of the world's first nuclear weapon not only acts as a detailed character study of a conflicted historical figure, but skillfully communicates the ethical weight and complexity of the decisions which were made. The entire cast gives outstanding performances, and there is not a weak performer in the bunch. I have no doubt that Cillian Murphy and Emily Blunt will be up for award and Oscar consideration. While some complained about the film's length, I was completely engrossed for the entire runtime. Despite being a biopic, Nolan incorporates his non-linear narrative structures and penchant for twists brilliantly into Oppenheimer. If you know the details of the real-life story, then the twists obviously won't come as a surprise, but the betrayals and plotting between the characters was unexpected for me. The scientific aspects were also fascinating, highlighting seemingly contradictory ideas such as light being treated as both a wave and a particle, known as a photon. Einstein is also featured in the film and acts as an interesting contrast to Oppenheimer.
What if I told you we were putting a team together?
Even though I am not usually interested in biopics, Oppenheimer seriously impressed me and acts as an outstanding addition to Nolan's filmography. Now, I'd like to shout out some honorable mentions. Cocaine Bear, Megan, Talk to Me, VHS 85, the Super Mario Bros. Movie, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, Skinamarink, The Outwaters, Evil Dead Rise, Sisu, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Influencer, Sissy, The Creator, Totally Killer, Renfield, Killers of the Flower Moon, and It's a Wonderful Knife. And finally, my number one choice goes to Barbie. Like Guardians 3, Barbie was a film I didn't even plan on watching. However, I started to hear interviews with the cast where they said the film was not going to be what audiences were expecting, and oh how right they were. Barbie is a sharply written critique of corporate greed, societal expectations, and gender struggles that perfectly blends comedic and emotional elements into a beautiful film for all ages, regardless of gender. Tools like Ben Shapiro might try to convince you that this film is anti-men, but I think that just shows their ignorance to the complex gender relations depicted. Ken isn't a one-dimensional villain, but rather we see how his descent into toxic masculinity is fueled by his insecurities and how he is underappreciated by others. Barbie also takes heavy shots at its corporate owners, Mattel, which underscores the creative freedom Gerwig was given with this project. As with many of the films on this list, I thought the cast was outstanding, nailing both the comedic and dramatic scenes. The film is not afraid to get emotional, especially during the conversations between Barbie and her creator, which touches on a number of existential concerns. I remember before the film came out that one of the hosts on 102.1 The Edge said that the Billie Eilish song would probably be used at the start of Act 3 during a brief dark night of the soul where everything would go back to happy comedy afterwards, but its use in the actual film is completely different. The practical sets, as well as the singing and dancing sequences, are all incredibly well designed and choreographed. I debated for a while whether Barbie or Oppenheimer was going to be my number one, but Barbie wins out for its excellent social commentary that brings humanity to complex issues rather than just villainizing. Like one of the promos said, if you like Barbie, if you hate Barbie, this film is for you, because everyone can learn something from this brilliant sensation of a film. So those are my top 10 favorite films of 2023. As always, thank you for listening to my ramblings. Doom Grips, out.